I have an experience that happened just a year ago, and I believe I'll always have a reminder of it. My adopted parents wanted me to get a job since I was 20. I was kind of looking forward to having a job and being able to pay for some extra stuff I wanted. So I began to put my application in at various places. Almost all of the places I applied at said that they didn't need anyone right then, but they would keep my application just in case. I was starting to get frustrated, but then my friend Monique mentioned that she had seen a modeling company wanting to hire high school seniors as models. At first I thought I wouldn't be able to get it since I was older than other seniors. Monique convinced me to go apply though, and if they asked, I could explain I was a couple grades behind because of what happened when I was younger. So we set out to apply for the modeling job. We pulled up to the address to find that it was in what looked like an office building. We looked at each other and shrugged. They must have left out which floor and office to go to. Fortunately, when we entered, there was a directory listing what companies were in the building. Getting to the room, we were greeted by a secretary with a wide smile, though it seemed odd somehow. I pushed the thought from my head as she handed us a couple applications. It was basically the standard application except tailored to modeling. I was worried about filling out that I didn't have any modeling experience, but I had to tell the truth on it. Finally, I was done filling out the application and handed it in. I was going to wait for Monique to finish her application, then we would leave, but the secretary told me to go right on through to the interview. This should have been a clue to get out right then, but I was a bit naive. When I went back, another woman greeted me with that same odd smile. She motioned me to sit down and then began asking me questions. Some of the questions were a bit odd, like how many people were in my family, and who my friends were. I didn't think much about those questions. One of the questions she asked was if I knew my measurements, which I only had the basics. She told me not to worry too much about it, that they have someone who will take my measurements. After chatting a little more, she told me that I was hired, and to go through another door so I could get started. I was excited to have a job that didn't take a lot of skill. The next room had a guy in it, and when he saw me, he smiled that same odd smile the others had. I was starting to get a bit uneasy now, but I rationalized it was just my imagination. The uneasy feeling had to be because he was male and I was a girl, since I didn't feel this way with the women. Still, as he started talking to me, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Then he had me stripped down to my bra and panties. I was uneasy about it, but he explained that sometimes they get jobs to model underwear, and he needed to know what I looked like in underwear. My feeling of unease grew, but if it was part of the job, then I had to get over it. With trembling hands, I stripped down to my underwear, expecting the man to look at me in a sexual way. To my surprise, he just looked at me with a detached eye. I then had the thought that he's gay and wouldn't be attracted to me. I felt a bit more comfortable with that, but I was still a bit uneasy. The man seemed to notice this and gave me some tea to help me calm down. I shouldn't have drank that tea because it wasn't long after finishing it that my eyes grew heavy and I plummeted into blackness. I came to sometime later and realized I was strapped naked to something that was almost straight up and down. I opened my eyes and saw Monique in the same situation. Each of her legs were strapped separately, as were her arms, while a couple straps went across her torso. What she was strapped to looked like some sort of table with some padding. Trying to move, I figured that I was strapped the same way. We looked at each other and Monique started asking where I thought we were. I thought that maybe we were in the basement of the building. That's when someone in what looked like a hazmat suit came in. Upon hearing the person remark that we were both awake now, I knew it was the guy who had given me the tea. Monique must have recognized him too because she started ranting at him for drugging us. I said that he couldn't treat us like this, but he said that he could because we were models. Monique argued that this was not modeling but a sick game. What the guy said next sent chills down my spine. He said that we would be modeling clothes, but we wouldn't be doing it like we thought. The guy rolled an air compressor and tank over to us. He touched Monique's face, and I could hear the joy in his voice as he said that it was the first African American he got a chance to work on. He expressed a desire to work on more diverse people, but that until today only Caucasians had answered the ads. With a sigh, he picked up an airbrush and started spraying her right foot. Monique screamed as the liquid made contact with her skin. Something bizarre happened. Her skin took on a hardened look. As he worked up her leg on doing the straps, her skin continued to take on a hardened look. Once he got up to her hip, he proceeded to spray her other foot and work up. I would have expected her to kick him, but it was obvious she couldn't move her leg. I think we both figured out what was happening as he finished her left leg and started spraying her stomach. He was turning her into a mannequin. He proceeded to spray her arms like he had done her legs, moving them into the position he wanted. All this time she was screaming and begging him to stop, to reverse what he was doing. He ignored her though and kept on spraying her. I was too horrified to do anything but watch as my best friend was turned into a mannequin. Once he was done with her arms, he took her off the table and continued to spray her torso. Suddenly she went silent, though her mouth was still moving. Terror filled her eyes as we both realized that she could no longer breathe. At this point, only her head was still flesh, but that wouldn't last much longer. The guy positioned her head as he applied the liquid to it. In seconds after, she had stopped breathing. The guy had finished transforming her into a mannequin. I realized that I was crying over the loss of my best friend. The guy strapped her back up on the table and sprayed her some more, moving different parts of her until he seemed satisfied with the position of her body and eyes. Next, the guy turned to me, and I started straining against the straps holding me. I was no longer frozen with fear. Now I was trying to get away. My heart was beating so fast that I thought it was going to burst. The guy laughed and said that it was useless, that there was no escape. As if to emphasize that, he started to spray my left foot. I screamed as the lights hit my flesh, and I felt it harden into whatever mannequins are made out of. He got to a little bit above my ankle when I felt the spray stop. The guy cursed and wheeled the air compressor and tank through a set of doors. I don't know what had happened, but it gave me a little bit more time. I continued to strain against the straps until finally the one holding my right arm popped off. I was a bit surprised, but I quickly took advantage and released the other straps holding me. I lightly dropped to the floor, barely noticing that I could still feel my foot, though it was different. I quickly looked around and noticed some doors in the opposite direction from where the guy had gone. That had to be my escape. I looked at Monique, thinking I should bring her with me, but I decided not to. There was nothing I could do for her now, and she would slow me down. As much as it hurt me to leave her there, I did. I turned and ran as fast and as well as I could, with a foot and ankle that couldn't move. My heart was pounding even more than before, and I was shaking by the time I reached the doors. I thought I was going to collapse, but the thought of the guy grabbing me and finishing transforming me into a mannequin forced me to continue on. There was a short hall beyond the doors that led to another set of doors. It seemed like my best option, so I ran for them. Then I kind of sensed something right behind me, and thinking it was the guy, I ran faster. I bolted out the door into a parking lot and I continued to run. I could still sense something behind me, so I pushed myself harder. My instinct was to look back to see what was chasing me and how close it was. However, I had watched quite a few horror films, and looking back almost always spelled doom for the characters. So I forced myself to keep my eyes ahead of me and keep running. I don't know how long I ran or what I ran past. All I know was that by the time I ran into a police officer, literally, I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed into his arms, too weak to stand up. He asked what had happened, and I tried to tell him between gasps of air. I don't think he believed the story I gasped out, but he did remark that there were red marks on my body that made part of my story believable. He called for EMTs, and an ambulance then took pictures of the marks. Once the ambulance arrived, I was transported to the hospital, where an examination was done and blood was taken. As it turns out, there was a hallucinogen in my blood, so that explained the crazy parts of my story. No one seemed to notice that my foot wasn't flesh anymore. Once I was released from the hospital, I went to Monique's family and told them how sorry I was that I couldn't bring Monique back with me. They looked at me like I was crazy and wanted to know who I was. I was surprised by this, but I told them my name. They said they didn't know me. I told them that they did, that I had been in their house numerous times sleeping over with Monique. I even described what was in their house. At this, they threatened to call the police and have me arrested for breaking and entering. I didn't know what to make of that. It wasn't only her family that didn't remember Monique. My family didn't either, and no one at school did. The seat Monique used to sit in was occupied by another girl who also had Monique's locker. It wasn't only that, though. Pictures of Monique were gone. Pictures of me and Monique were altered to be just pictures of me, or of me and another girl. It was like Monique had been erased from existence. It was a little while after that I got a job in a clothing store that I applied at before this all started. I wasn't sure about working there because of the mannequins, but I wanted a job, and this was the only one to call me back. My first day working, I was assigned to dress up a mannequin in the Catholic school uniform. They told me it was an African American one, and it was in the back. They gave me the uniform to put on it and sent me back. With some trepidation, I went back and started to cry seeing Monique. Another salesgirl asked me why I was crying, and knowing that she would think I was crazy if I told the truth, I told her because the mannequin looked like a friend of mine who had died recently. She gave me her condolences and offered to dress Monique herself. I thanked her, but told her that it was my job and I would do it. As I dressed her, I told her how sorry I was for leaving her, that I hadn't wanted to leave her, but I just couldn't take her with me. I figured Monique was still conscious, and able to feel everything from my own experience with still being able to feel my foot and things touching it. I've also come to the conclusion that most realistic mannequins were once people, and that they're still conscious inside their bodies. So just think about this. That realistic mannequin you look at in stores could have been your best friend, sister, brother, or child, and you've been made to forget.